Louis Theroux's been a significant figure in the documentary world for quite some time. I admit to having enjoyed much of his high-quality work, and have found him a personable, disarming character. The sort of attributes that have historically tended to get his subjects to open up. But there are some signs that the act may be wearing a bit thin. That the man who's prided himself on his neutrality is letting his own political inclinations show more overtly, and to influence his work to the detriment of the finished product's quality. As I write, Louis has just released a new documentary on America's far right. It's far from the first time he's covered this subject, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, as it's a compelling and valid topic. Louis's main focus this time was on a man I'll call Flick Nuentes, because if I used his real name, some YouTube algorithm would immediately ban this video. Now, to make it clear, I do not support or agree with these characters at all. And as a rule, they really don't come across terribly well. Their views, which border on those advocating a racial ethno-state, are not ones I endorse or share remotely. And neither, as he makes clear, does Louis. But extreme though they are, some of what they have to say is less shocking than you may expect. Some of these characters are also clearly joking. And Louis has obviously searched hard to air the most shocking material he can find in an effort to discredit these people. And some of it is very shocking. Though considering how much went into this BBC production, there's probably less than you think. But what really struck me about their ideology was how familiar much of it sounds, but in a way that's not hidden, censored or suppressed. In a way that's projected, shouted from the rooftops, and fully endorsed by the mainstream media. In Louis's film, Flick Nuentes told an enthusiastic crowd of Americans that white people founded this country. This country wouldn't exist without white people, and white people are done being bullied. Now, many will find those comments shocking, but large numbers of black activists express virtually identical sentiments, with the colours reversed. And they face zero sanction at all. Hannah Nicole Jones has based her entire ideology on identical arguments, completely rewriting American history in the process. Yet she's not been pushed to the fringes, demonised, and virtually banned from the entire internet. Quite the opposite. In fact, the New York Times journalist was given a Pulitzer Prize, handed a prestigious chair at Howard University, and scooped $625,000 when awarded the MacArthur Fellowship's Genius Award. Her divisive 1619 project was not castigated, like the views of Slick Nuentes. It was placed on the curriculum of 3,500 high schools just 6 months after its launch, despite the fact that it's riddled with historical inaccuracies and overt racism. We can also see this discrepancy in the shocking trailer for Showtime's new series, Everything's Gonna Be All White. Just watch this snippet and try to picture it with the colours reversed.
I think what annoys me most about white people is when they pretend like they're the victim. What's also annoying is when they kill us.
What is fragile about whiteness when everything has been constructed around it?
Every part of who I am has been distorted or criminalized.
It's really just a bunch of white lies.
We're storming the Capitol!
You're not patriots, you're ridiculous.
One of the definitions of American whiteness is ignorance.
White people, we are not your problem. You are.
Should white people today feel any responsibility for slavery?
Hell yeah.
It's quite an amazing contrast, isn't it? The racist diatribes of one side are demonised and driven to the fringes. But on the other side, they are celebrated and handed a multi-million-dollar contract with one of America's most prestigious cable networks. Now, Louis Theroux is damning about the hatred whipped up by right-wing groups. But what happens with the radical black activist groups on the left? Well, in 2016, Mika Xavier Johnson, a BLM activist, shot and killed 5 police officers and wounded 9 others. In November 2021, another BLM supporter, Darrell Brooks Jr., drove his car into a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin. 6 were killed, one of whom was an 8-year-old boy, and 28 were critically wounded, including numerous children. The Wikipedia page on that attack predictably makes no mention of his political affiliation, which would never happen with a far-right terrorist, and they attempt to brush away his crime as the result of mental illness. In January 2022, another BLM activist committed yet another horrific crime. Jewish Democratic politician Craig Greenberg was shot at by Quintez Brown. Remarkably, BLM, who seem to have done little to aid law-abiding black people, paid Brown's bail so that the attempted assassin could get back on the streets. Many suspect an anti-Semitic motive in Brown's alleged assault. After all, similar radical groups like the Black Panthers have a noxious history of anti-Semitism. And BLM founders, like Patrisse Cullors, signed a pact with Hamas, a group with a written manifesto of genocide against the Jews. The likes of Johnson, Brooks and Brown are all far more dangerous than the sort of trolls featured in Louis Theroux's film. But of course, Louis will never do an expose on BLM, Antifa, or any other deranged group on the left. He'll continually shine the spotlight on the far right, while giving the far left a free pass. There'll never be any balance in his exposés. Never a suggestion that there might be a noxious element to the other side too. He'll continually feed the lie that the far right are a far greater threat, even as the body count of the far left continues to rise. Indeed, the very next week, Louis put out a film about America's gang and rap scene. But despite the fact that these were men shooting and killing people, rather than just calling them names or joking about them, on this occasion there was no condemnation or judgment. He was entirely supportive and understanding. This attitude, this brazen hypocrisy, is endemic. Justin Trudeau knelt before the BLM protests, despite the fact that they happened at the height of the pandemic and produced riots where businesses were looted and burned, and dozens of people were shot and killed, including a 7-year-old girl. But when the Canadian truckers protested entirely peacefully, with the mild Omicron variant in retreat, and virtually 90% of Canadians vaccinated, he invoked martial law and sent in the cavalry, which trampled on elderly disabled women. The usual line here is that black people have been historically oppressed, so different standards are now justified. But the key word here is historically. Because when you've had a black president and vice president, then you simply can't answer that anymore. Not with any validity at any rate. Ironically, it's the disdain of the liberal elites that has motivated the white working classes into the beliefs and irreverent humour that these liberals now despise. We live in a culture that accepts, even encourages, relentless abuse and hatred directed at white men. But rather than consider that the rise of this far-right culture may be a response to that perhaps a less sweepingly derisive approach might be desirable, That scorn is simply doubled down on and amped up. The result? Well, that anger will just grow. And the far right will swell even more. We're on a dangerous cycle. But it was begun and is being accelerated by the oh-so-liberal left. Louis' part of that problem. And the internet giants, the New York Times, Showtime, and wider society will all close their eyes to reality too. That culture will only embolden the far left even more and make them ever more dangerous. There may yet be worse crimes to come. And Louis Theroux, oblivious to it though he is, will be complicit in it when it comes. If you'd like to support this channel, please like, subscribe, and think about buying my books. They're called The Tyranny of the Left, and they're available on the links below. They go into subjects like this in significantly greater detail. Please do feel free to pick them up and let me know what you think. Thank you.